Today, I am going to talk about robustness and how you can safeguard against old injuries with your strength and conditioning. So there's lots of fancy terminology for this nowadays. People started calling it robustness a couple of years back. When I learned about it in college over 10 years ago, it was just prehabilitation. Prehabilitation was that it was a safeguarding against potential injuries in the future by working specific areas that the athlete or sport called for. For argument's sake, if you had an athlete with a pre-existing knee injury who had fully rehabbed the knee injury and had fully returned to play and had fully returned to contact, we would then prehab against future knee injuries. And this has been a very common thing in strength and conditioning all over the world for many, many years. And I think is a really important principle to apply to Jiu Jitsu. And the reason that it's a really important principle to apply to Jiu Jitsu is because in Jiu Jitsu, injuries happen by nature and the value of the sport more often than they do in other sports. So you want to have a good way of safeguarding against that, and if it does happen, having a good strategy to deal with it. And one of the best strategies that you can have to deal with this is to have a robustness approach with your training. And where we like to put the robustness training in is in after the warm-up, after the key lifts, after the accessory work, we have a little bit of training time at the end. And if you're unsure on any of those things, I have videos in each of those sections previous on the channel. Once we've done all of that and we're just kind of tidying up the session towards the end, we have the opportunity to do the hyper-specific prehabilitation work just for you. And that's going to be very hyper-individualized and very specific to what you need in your prehab. What I find with a lot of people, if they don't have a pre-existing injury history, well then what we do is we take the most common sites of injury in Jiu-Jitsu, which we have research on, and then we go from there. And we'll find that a lot of those common injury sites are the hand and the wrist and the elbow and the ankle and the knee. Those are all common sites that we'll attack with our prehab straight out the gate, and we look to build strength and specific range in these areas. Then invariably the athlete is going to run into issues over their time training on the mats. They're going to get injured, they're going to have weaknesses show up, and then this specific training is what we can really use to highlight with the robustness time in the program. This is where we can start to get really individualized with our training, because ultimately a lot of your warm-ups and your main lifts and your accessory lifts aren't going to change a huge amount person to person. There will be a little bit of variance of course, and there'll be a little bit of variance depending on where you are at in a training cycle versus someone else. And then there's a myriad of other factors like training history and proficiency that affect this. But ultimately a lot of training for sport is somewhat going to look the same, and we're going to be chasing pretty similar variables. However, with the prehab and the robustness work, this is definitely an opportunity to hone in on what you need hyper-specific. We find that as people train over a long period of time and they pick up a load of different injuries along the way, but we find that their prehab work and their robustness work becomes highly specific to them, highly individualized, and it's a part of their training that they really enjoy and they really value. Because ultimately, there is no way that you can actually safeguard against injury, as injury is an acute, catastrophic event that's going to happen if it's going to happen. And really, there is no such thing as injury prevention. All that we can do is we can look at injury risk factor reduction, and then we can attempt to make that a robust part of our training. And this is how it's often going to be dealt with in a lot of professional sports where there are specific risk factors at play, and we can address these in our training. Because ultimately, injuries are just a part of training and they cannot be avoided. But we can certainly have strategies that allow us to take the injuries when they happen, deal with them, and then progress that as part of our training for the future. Because if we progressively add these things in over time, we're going to build a really nice hyper-individualized training program and training protocol that lets us deal with these things when they spring up. And then over time we become very adept at dealing with these things and then just rolling with the punches. And when you're doing a sport like Jiu-Jitsu, which is hyper-focused on attacking joint structure and attacking people's limbs, and injuries are going to happen as a part of the sport, it's really important to have some sort of protocol, some sort of way of dealing with these things. And then lastly, just to make the point on this, I'm going to finish with an example. Alright, if you're watching the video and you're thinking, yeah man, that's great, but if you could just give me all of this in a program, that would be really good. I've got you sorted. If you go to the link below, you're going to find the Ultimate Training Week, where I've put all of this into an actual training program that you can just go to the gym and do. It'd be easier, wouldn't it? And you can get that at the link below. There's videos for all of the exercises, so it's really clear on what you can do. You can get stuck into that straight away. Back to the video. So last year, my client Jeff dislocated his shoulder. This is something that we had to deal with straight away, as well as get back to a pretty robust state, as Jeff needs this for work as well as Jiu-Jitsu. So as a consequence of that, it was vital that we put a strategy in place that was going to see him back in a place where he had full function of this joint. So that's exactly what we did. We got him to go to the physio, get the relevant surgery that he needed to get, etc, etc, etc. And then once he was fully at the point that he could re-enter strength training, we re-entered our training. What we did then was we built specific strength, progressing on the rehab protocols that he had been given by the physio. The physio was going to have given the athlete exercises to achieve certain goals. We can look at these exercises, the goals that the athlete is attempting to achieve with them, and we can progress these goals and we can extrapolate out more difficult progressions for these exercises. What we can do is we can also do this alongside building out supporting structures of local musculature and supporting tissues. And we can integrate these two approaches in building up the robustness and strength around the joint again. Once the joint is fully functional again and we're all happy with that and physio is happy with that, then we can just look to progressively build strength around the joint as well as doing all of the things that we said previous. We did this in Jeff's example with the shoulder, and now we joke that Jeff's weak shoulder that he had dislocated last year is now stronger than his other shoulder. And I believe that this is ultimately the eventuality that everyone should aim for, which is rehab your injury to the point that it becomes strong and stronger than the other joint. It's a small thing, but you know, it's nice to just see an injury be dealt with so well and to such a high degree. Now you know that Jeff rolls on this shoulder and doesn't even think about it and is fully confident in his jiu-jitsu as a consequence. And that's just an example of someone that had a specific issue and then we dealt with a specific issue, and now we have prehab that we do all the time with Jeff. And we're aware that if there's an issue that's likely to occur in the future, it could likely occur at this shoulder. So we're going to do everything that we can do to prehab that as much as we can and have him as ready for training as we can get him. And this is a really nice way of taking that robustness work and that specific work and integrating it into your training based on what you need. Now you've built out a really nice program, you've got a great warm-up, you've got your key lifts, you've got your accessory lifts and your hyper-individualized specific robustness work. How are you going to deliver all of those physical qualities without a big gas tank? So in this next video, we're going to take a look at building an unstoppable gas tank and look at a new training approach that I've been using with all of my athletes.